If you're here, you really, really believe that a life lived beyond fear and in alignment with your true self is the key to freedom and fulfillment. So it's for the rebels, it's for the creatives, it's for the ambitious, it's for the misunderstood, and it's for those who really know that being brave and just being yourself is a lot easier said than done. So my goal with this podcast is to introduce you to the people and the practical tools that will help you actually be brave, align with your true self, and create the freedom and fulfillment that you desire in all areas of your life. And remember, no matter what challenges you're facing, no matter how lost, stuck, behind, or frustrated you might feel in your life, there's always a bigger plan. God's plan. And if you trust that and commit to riding the waves of life with grace and courage, you're closer than you think. Today's guest is a writer, an author, a book publisher, an adoring mother of two, and an entrepreneur. She's inspired by snow, painting, beautiful music, her children, the sound of the ocean, and the smell of something delicious baking. She loves helping people get their message out into the world through writing and books, and believes our stories aren't just meant for us, they're meant for others to hear. She's helped over 200 people share their stories and never planned on becoming an entrepreneur. But she built it in a moment we can probably all relate to, a moment of there is no choice but for this to work, and is here to share her story and message of hope. I'm super excited to be interviewing you today because I love writing. I consider myself a writer, and I really actually want to write a book in the future too. And I'm sure many people and many people listening will want to as well. So before we get into like the really fun stuff, I'd love to just know a little bit about you, a little bit about your story, how you started, how you ended up here. And you can go as far back as you want, or start where you are.
Sure. Well, thank you for having me on. So like most writers, I started out reading books as a child. That was the cool thing to do in my world. I grew up reading tons of books, started dabbling in writing a little bit when I was in like middle school because I thought, hey, I've read all these books, surely I can write a book. And that was kind of the first time that I realized I had zero skills for writing a book. I thought I had it all figured out. I sat down and wrote, it was like 14 notebook pages. So having that under my belt, I actually went off to college, majored in biology and picked up majors in English. So I have a master's in English. From there, I had started dabbling again in the writing.
How did you go from biology to English literature?
Well, so this is fun. Where I went to school, we were able to take courses just to fill in holes. They just needed you to take extra credits in certain disciplines. And I realized that I could get credit for reading books. And that was a brilliant realization because that's really what I wanted to be doing. So I majored in biology and picked up a minor in English because I had so many English courses. And then someone said, hey, if you stick around one more year, you can have a major in English as well. So I graduated with a biology and English degree. And then I went on to get a master's because I didn't know what I wanted to be when I grew up.
Yeah, I think we all relate to that. Yeah.
Yeah. And I actually was told I'd be very marketable as a science writer. So what I did after college was I spent 10 years working for the US government as a writer for 2 different departments. And the last 8 years were actually as a science writer. I was working for the Department of Energy, and I got to tell stories about all the things that we were doing to help with carbon emissions. It's a huge problem. So the people we worked with did a lot of research on how to mitigate carbon emissions, keep them from going up into the atmosphere and causing global warming and all those fun things. So that was a lot of what I did, but I also got to do storytelling, which was the cool part. I got to know the scientists and tell some of their backstories. And we had some of the neatest people working there. They had hobbies like one worked at a local, like a horse ranch, where she would go over and walk the horses, and they were doing therapy with kids who had like cerebral palsy or MS, different things where they might have trouble with core strength or with with social skills. So the horses were helping them with, being able to balance or being able to connect with another living thing.
Yes, I've heard equine therapy is really good for cancer as well. Amazing. They're such an empathic animal.
Yeah. But like that was one of the stories I got to tell, and getting to know the different scientists and say, hey, it's not just some old dude in a lab coat. This is a real person.
Yeah, it's so funny how we have such stereotypes. There is a real stereotype. That's what I immediately think when I think scientists, like just some mad scientist in a lab, like with a white coat.
Right.
But they're actually like doing, really real people.
Oh yeah, people of all ages, races, men and women, and I got to help connect the world with those people. And that's really where I was honing my storytelling skills, was connecting with these real people. On the side, I was writing novels because I just love to write so much.
Just fiction novels?
Yes. Yeah, I started out with fiction. Actually, all my books are fiction except one, and that one is How to Write a Book for Your Business. So the bulk of my work.
I'd love to talk about that.
Yeah. But then when I left the Department of Energy, I started my own business doing writing, like web copy, press releases, that kind of stuff. But as soon as people found out that I had written books, they would say, well, never mind the rest. We want to know how to write a book for our business, because that's not something we know how to do. And that's when I realized this is a real need. I started coaching, editing books, and then I opened the publishing house in the spring of 2021.
That's amazing. So you actually own your own publishing house?
I do, yes.
Okay, so tell us a little bit about that story, because, and the reason this is called Closer Than You Think is because the more I dive into it, and I actually just saw a post of yours which was about hope, and I was like, I guess this podcast is kind of a little bit, it is. It's to do with hope. It's about giving people hope and sharing people's stories so that they see what's possible on the other end. And like, even when you say that, I'm like, wow, I'm sure there's so many people who are like, how would I even get there? Like their dreams just seem so far away, or like, so is this even possible? And so you've gone from, just writing articles and working for the government to actually creating your own publishing house. So tell us a bit about that journey.
Yeah. So I never actually intended to be an entrepreneur. I had no plan for it at all. I didn't even know that people could set out on their own and be successful as writers or have their own publishing house or anything. I
actually had a theme that I'm seeing with most of the successful people I'm interviewing is that they never actually set out to do the thing that they're doing. That's a real theme. It's actually, because like some people think that you need to have this super clear vision and like you need to be super clear on your purpose and you need to know exactly what you want. I've seen that a lot. And I think there's this, and I think that can hold people back a lot. So you just said like, this was not in the plan. It wasn't even a thought. Like it just, I
think part of that is being open. And I think the way we are raised is so like, you got to get on the path. You got to make sure you get the grades. You got to make sure you get into the right school. And by the time you get out, it's all right, I got to get this job and that's going to be it forever. I actually lost my job when I was working for the government. I'd been there 10 years. I had a 1-year-old and a 3-year-old at home. And they called me into the office on my youngest daughter's first birthday. And they said, hey, we're laying off half the staff and it's all senior staff. So you get to go. I was like
no reason, or
they had some reasons, but they were kind of just, they were just cutting half the staff. And so they took all the senior staff. So everybody who'd been there the longest. Yeah. So when you think that you're safe, it was the total opposite.
This is how I ended up on my path of entrepreneurship, is because I was let go from a job. And I mean, I had some ideas. I wasn't ready yet, but it's almost like the universe was like, we're throwing you right in the deep end. And and it's funny because we're sold this lie that it's the safest thing, and it's actually, I found it to be the unsafest thing. I realize now I love being in control of my own destiny. but there's a fine line between like being in control of it and also being open to like new possibilities.
Right.
Because anyway, that's amazing. Okay. So that would have
Yeah.
been really like, well, eye-opening, like
Yeah,
just
it was.
shocking.
It really was. So I came home and I was like, well, I don't know what I'm going to be doing in 2 weeks, but it
Mhm.
has to work because I have to figure it out.
Yeah.
I did what most people do when they lose their job. I went on Facebook and ranted about it. And one of my friends actually texted me later and she's like, hey, how you doing? How you holding up? And she said, after we talked a little bit and she knew I was decently stable, she said, so do you have an entrepreneurial drive? And I'm like, that sounds like a drink and I probably shouldn't be drinking. So no. And she said, well, I really think you ought to start your own writing business because you have the talent and I know you can do it.
Mm,
And I really took that to heart. She was somebody I trusted and I'd known for years. And I was like, okay, well, if
amazing.
she believes in me, I can believe in myself
Yeah.
too. Yeah. So
Oh,
that's how I got started.
that's amazing.
Yeah.
Okay. So, and then you just started working with clients like one-on-one, or how did you?
Well, I kind of laid low for a little bit, fished around to see if anybody knew of jobs, all of that kind of stuff. Just like, well, I'll do the entrepreneur thing if nothing else pans out.
Mhm.
And sure enough, nothing else was coming up at all. I
Yeah.
went to a couple networking groups and
Yeah.
I just immediately clicked with people. It seemed like, okay, these women are the type of people I want to be around.
Yeah.
I started out with women because I thought, okay, this is gonna be kind of a safe space, kind of
Yeah.
sisters,
Yeah.
probably meet some other moms.
Yeah.
Um, so when I went, it turned out, some people do need writers. Okay, well, I can write web material. Oh, you need a press release. Well, I can do that. And then they started referring me to other people. And, from
Amazing.
there, that's where I started building my
So you're kind of like a
confidence.
freelancer, so to say, and
Yeah,
then it developed into a
yeah,
publishing house. Wow.
yeah.
Okay. So when did you publish your first book, and how did that
Um,
happen? Because
that's
because people probably think like, I know you can, I mean, I don't know much about the industry. I mean, I love reading too, and I have a dream in the future of writing a book, but I know you can self-publish now, but before, like back in the day, you never be used to be able to. Yeah, I don't know much about the industry, but if you could talk a little bit more about that and like how you published your first book and that process.
Yeah, that's another funny story. So I had written 5 novels by the time I decided to publish.
Wow.
I had been pitching different publishing house. Well,
Okay,
I'd
when
pitched.
you say I've written 5 novels, does that mean like you write them, but they don't see the light of day?
I was writing them, and then I was pitching agents. So if
Right.
you want to work with a
Okay.
traditional
So
publishing
you were
house.
trying to get it published, like,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah. So as I was writing, I was pitching, and they kept building up, and nobody was taking them. And I finally hit a point where I just said, you know what, I'm tired of this, and I want to be in the driver's seat. So I
Yeah.
figured out how to self-publish, and I self-published all 5 of those novels the year I was pregnant with my oldest daughter. Some people
Wow.
clean their house. I published 5 novels. So
Yes, that's
that's how I got started.
amazing. Yeah. So is it like so I guess most writers then would go through because the one that always comes to mind for me is J.K. Rowling, because of the Harry Potter story. I always find that story so inspiring of how she I think she said she pitched it to how many people over how many years, and it just got rejected and rejected and rejected.
Yeah. Yeah. It
And
was a lot.
yeah. And then so is that so that's the process for most writers. Like they have an idea, they write the book, and then the idea is to go pitch it to people and kind of just hope that they like the idea.
Yeah, that's how it always used to be.
Yeah.
Self-publishing was kind of getting started in the early 2000s. I
Mhm.
self-published everything in 2012, and it was still pretty much a fledgling industry at that point.
Mm,
But before that, yeah, if you wanted to be published, you had to pitch to an agent, and then the
yeah.
agent pitched it to the publishing house. So you had to find somebody that
Yeah.
really believed in your story.
Yeah, because like now, like thinking about some of the freedoms we have now, just even with social media, with getting our work out into the world. It just seems like it's crazy to think like, oh, someone else has to approve of my idea before it gets published.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
think there are pros and cons to it. So
Yeah.
knowing that somebody else believes in your work is a nice thing.
Yeah.
I find that like I work with my team, like when I publish a new novel, whether it's mine or my clients, I'm working with an editor who sits down and they kind of say, okay, this makes sense to me. I understand this. This is going to connect with the reader. Or they say, I don't get this paragraph. This makes no sense.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
having that sort of thing going on, I think that is nice. So I would say just putting stuff out to the world and saying, you know, this is great, I'm just going to put it out.
Mhm.
You know, I don't think that's as good of an idea as it
Yeah,
is.
yeah, I see what you mean. Like it's definitely good to have feedback and like
Yeah,
that reflection back. Yeah.
yeah.
Hmm. And then so how did you start your own publishing company?
Um, so I had been working with people as a writing coach and a book editor for several years. I did that for about 5 years. Toward the end of 2020 was when I was realizing I can really help people more than this. That's when I started bringing on editors so I could take on more than one book at a time because I was starting to get more requests and I didn't want to have to keep saying, oh, I can get you, you know, next month and the month after and keep booking
Yes.
further out. From there, I realized it was just going to be simpler if I could just say, let me take the stress off of you.
Yeah.
And you know, take somebody's book, put it through the full process and say, all right, it's published now, you have a copyright. All you have to do is share about it and talk about it and, you know, pitch people, you know, if you wanted to do a speaking gig, use it to pitch. But we create the product and we make sure that it is the best product you could possibly have.
Yeah.
So that is so freeing to a lot of people, especially entrepreneurs. They're busy.
Yes, yes. So do you mean just like the book, but what about the marketing of the book?
Mhm.
Is that responsibility with you as a publisher, or how does that work?
So we have somebody who handles PR around the launch. And she will pitch to podcasts. She pitches to sometimes TV shows, you know, depending on what the genre of the book
Okay.
is. So we get a lot of buzz around the launch. And then as the book is selling, you know, we put some money back into doing some marketing. So we do some ads. Sometimes we do pitch if we spot other things that that client would be good for, because we want to make sure that they are selling their books and it's not just sitting there.
Yes. Cool. So do you have like a particular client? Like, is it like any other business where you work with a specific type of client in a specific industry, or can you go quite broad and you're like, well, we do kids books and we do business books and we do like all of these things, or do you niche down?
We work on a lot of different kinds of books. We do fiction, we do nonfiction, children's books, but all the books that we do have a big message. So we've done children's books about kindness or, you know, discovering your inner gift.
Love
We're
that.
doing a buddy book coming out soon. We have fiction books that talk about, like my fiction books talk about discovering who you are and what path you want to be on in your life. We have another one coming out this spring talking about the girl's grandmother has dementia. And so she's talking about that relationship between her and her grandmother and, you know, falling in love as a teenager and all of those kind of things. So anything that has a big message. Our business books range from, we just did one about how to live with grief and actually come toward hope. As you were talking about hope earlier.
Yes.
We've done books about, you know, overcoming different challenges like alcoholism or cancer or building a business. But all of them have that big message of, you know, something that they want to spread throughout the world instead of, you know, there's nothing that's really a small message sort of thing. It's all things that really impact people.
So it's really meaningful. Like,
yeah,
that's amazing. I don't know if you know anything about human design, but my conscious Mercury, which is actually your message, like the message that you're here to share with the world, it's like a consistent theme that you have throughout your life. And mine is gate 47, which is, it's the gate of realization, but it's really about hope. It's really about transmutation and transformation. It's about hope. So there is this consistent theme in everything that I do that has this idea of like hope attached to it. But I think sometimes I find, and I love that, because I think stories are the thing that make people feel something and make people give people hope even in the midst of some of the most challenging times, because like without hope, what do you have? Like nothing really. But then also it can also be like a way to maybe escape, like, oh well, I hope that's going to happen, but it's like, yeah, but what are you doing about it to make it happen? Because there's also that part. So sometimes it can be like, okay, as a coach, I have to find that balance between like, yes, giving you hope and being an expander in your life, but yeah, it's like, well, like let's not just hope for everything to happen, let's make it happen as well. So I love that. And your message and the mission, I think that every entrepreneur has, like, or that they need to have in order to keep going in the really challenging times, is that anchor that brings them back to their why too, which I think is super important for any person on an entrepreneurial journey. So I'm trying to think of so with business books, because I think most of the women here that will be watching this will be entrepreneurs. There's a certain stage that I think every entrepreneur, like I have a dream to write a book one day. I don't know what it's going to be. I don't know if it's going to be attached to my business, probably attached to my soul's purpose. But there's a specific process. Like, can you take us through like a process? Like, I'm just thinking of, I haven't read it, but I've just been seeing a lot of the media about, Harry's new book, Spare. And I heard that there's a ghostwriter behind that. I know a little bit about ghostwriters, but like, I guess that person wrote it for him or he narrated it. I'd love to just hear more about like the process of how someone goes from, Harry's is an autobiography, but say somebody with a business that's really trying to get a message out, that's like, I really have this dream and this message that's just on my heart, and like the world just needs to know it. Like, I'm not going to feel complete at the end of my life if this is not out, if this is not in a book, if this is not in somebody's hands. Like, I have stories like in my head that I've never shared publicly that I'm like, I can't wait for someone to read this one day. And like, I don't even want to turn it into a Facebook post because I'm like, it just won't even do it justice. It's like, it has to be in a book, and it has to have the context, and it has to have everything. And it's like, and I know that like deep in my soul. And so, I have some really cool stories that I'm like, okay, so what's like, say someone gets, like, they have to be at a certain stage in their business, like earning a certain amount of money, or like, what would be the process that someone goes through?
I don't think it's important to be at a certain stage.
Okay.
I think that it's more important to know what you want to do with the book. So, you want to, if you're writing a book for your business, you want to make sure that it's actually kind of dovetailing with the business. You don't want to write a book about, let's say you're a business coach, and you sit down and you're like, wow, I really overcame some challenges with my health this year, and I want to write about that. Well, then you're creating a separate business. So it doesn't make a lot of sense to write about your health challenges if you're a business coach, unless it really goes together.
I see. Yes.
Yeah. So that's something to start with, is to think about where you are.
You should really support in the, I hate this word, but like the lead generation, like bringing bringing new customers in, like bringing people on a transformation journey. Yeah.
Right. And that's not the whole goal of it, but if you're writing a book with no goal at all,
yes,
then
of course.
what's the point of
Yeah.
writing the book?
Yeah. Like, it's still going to be a piece of your heart and a piece of your, like that giving without any expectations, I guess, attached to it, and it can really transform someone's life. It doesn't mean they have to go on the transformation journey, but there is kind of like a journey for someone to go on. So
Yeah, and you want to think about where you bring people into your business. So if you only work with like, let's say you're a business coach and you're working with 6-figure and above clients, you don't want to start someone out with, this is how you start a business. You want to talk to the people that are just about ready to come into your container, because it would be an obvious move for them to read the book and say, wow, I really connected with this person. Now I'm going to check out their programs, or now I'm going to get on their email list. Whatever level of commitment they're ready for, you want them to stay connected with you. So you have to figure out where they're going to come in and write the book from that perspective. The other thing is to think about, you've thought about the audience, so who those people are, what their challenges are, what you want them to get out of the book. Do you want them to get a small win? So you have to figure out what that small win is, because once they get that small win, they understand, hey, you have been there, you've done that, you've connected with them, they know, like, and trust you, and then they can move on to the obvious next step. So those are just some things to think about at the very beginning of your book journey. It's also really helpful to see what else is available in your genre. I like to call them your peers. So see what your peers are. Go on Amazon and start searching for other books in your genre. See if there's a gap you need to fill. See if it's oversaturated with a certain type of book. Your story is unique. It's unique to every single person, but you do want to see, what is going on out in the world? How do I fit into this, but also stand out? And then, before you sit down and start just banging away at the keyboard, you want to plan. I know this from experience because I wrote my first book by just sitting down and being like, oh, I have all these great things in my head and I'm going to put them out. And I think I spent several hours sitting at my computer, just getting all my thoughts out. And I had 3 chapters of garbage. And I cut most of it. It didn't go anywhere. I didn't know where I was going. So having a plan for where you want the audience to go and where you want the actual book to go, those are really imperative right up front.
Yeah, because I think that's important for people to think, like, just getting your thoughts out onto paper can just be like, a really soothing journaling practice, or it could just be getting your thoughts out. It doesn't necessarily mean that all your thoughts have to go into a book. Because I've written little things, like I've written ebooks and stuff like that in my own business. And the time and effort and the mental fortitude that really goes into it, into like the flow of it and making sure people get those little wins. It's like, it takes a lot of mental fortitude. It's not like, okay, I'm a writer and I'm just sitting at home writing. It's like, no, there's really a lot of mental effort that goes into this.
Yeah.
So
and you were asking, you were asking about ghostwriters too.
Yes, because I just recently read like the media storm about Harry's book Spare. And the fact that he had a ghostwriter, I was like, I wonder how that works.
So I know how that works. We actually have a ghostwriter who we work with. She's working on a book for one of my clients now. The way that works is it's all your ideas, but it's penned by somebody else. So she interviews you as the author, gets all of your ideas, listens to how you speak. So the book sounds like it's your tone. It sounds like you wrote it, and it probably actually has a lot of what you said in it. But then the ghostwriter's job is to create the structure and be able to string all of that together. So she might interview you about, if you're talking about a business book, she might say, you're a business coach. How did you get started? And you sit down and you tell her that whole story. Well, maybe it doesn't connect with the next thing she asks you about, but she figures out how that weaves together, and he or she figures out how it all weaves together and puts it together so it makes sense. And again, it meets your goal and it meets the goal of what the reader needs to achieve at the end of the book.
Right. So it really tells that story, and because that's a skill. It's a real skill to tell a story, isn't it?
It is.
Like an interesting one where you hook people in and people want more. So what is the difference between a book that really succeeds and tells a story that really touches people or keeps them hooked in, wanting more, and then say one that just is kind of successful but maybe not really? Is there some secret ingredient, or is it just kind of like in some instances just luck? Like,
so there are two sides to this. As far as being a really good book to read and connect with your audience, I think the key is vulnerability. Being able to open up and share pieces of you that aren't necessarily, you know, super shiny and wonderful.
Yeah.
Being able to explain things from the perspective that lets people see that you're not a perfect person, because I don't want to follow a perfect person and think I'm going to get to the same end result that they are. I'm not perfect. I know I'm going to fall off the wagon. I know I'm going to, you know, whatever it is, I'm not going to do it perfectly. If I'm learning some new process, or if I'm going through a challenge, there's going to be ups and downs. So as the author, you need to show those ups and downs in a nice way.
Yeah.
So there's that aspect to it. And then as far as making the book successful, there's, you know, the marketing, the PR, the advertising, those kind of things. And I believe that you can do that with any budget. It just takes effort and creativity if you're working with a smaller budget.
Vulnerability. Yes, that makes so much sense. Is it natural? Would it be natural for most writers to be vulnerable, or is it something that, like, as a writing coach, that you bring out in them, or?
For some people, it is natural. I think if you're more used to sharing a lot on social media or getting on and doing a lot of videos, speakers a lot of times will also, you know, have a lot less trouble because they're used to getting up on the stage in front of people, and it doesn't bother them as much that they're sitting there and, you know, spilling everything all over the page. But usually people have trouble, even if they are really experienced with that, they'll have trouble with stuff that is really close, like they haven't shared it before, stuff that maybe they haven't fully healed. So if there's some traumatic event in their lives, a lot of times that's where I'll catch them is, you know, as a coach, I'll see like choppy writing, short sentences, very little detail. Those are really key to me to say, hey, you know, what's going on here? Is this really something you want to share? And it's okay if you don't want to share it. It's okay if you say, no, I have to keep this hidden. This is not the time. But when you recognize that, you know, that vulnerability piece is really lacking, it's usually for a few reasons. Sometimes people just aren't used to it. And I have worked with clients where I've had to say, look, you got to tell me more about this. Tell me how you felt. I start with the 5 senses. You know, where did you feel this feeling? Was it butterflies in your stomach? Was it sweaty palms? Was it a massive headache? You know, tell me what was going on while this scene was playing out. And those are
like there needs to be this vividness to the story so that people feel like they're there or experiencing it with you almost. And,
you know, most people, when they are, you know, experiencing,
it's really hard to do, like even as someone who's like, I'm pretty self-expressed, it's hard to do because you have to really dig deep. You have to be like, okay, this is how it felt and this is what happened in the moment. And it's like, it's not easy.
It can be really challenging. But, you know, anybody who reads that, if they say, you know, oh my goodness, I felt my heart, you know, drop into my stomach, or my legs were bouncing the whole time, like, you know what that feeling is. You can know it by the physical feeling. You know what you're feeling in your heart, you know what you know, emotions you were going through. And a lot of times that can be way more descriptive than if you were like, I was incredibly angry. You know?
Oh my gosh, that makes so much sense. It's like not even the words of saying like I was angry that people, they need to like, the vividness. It's like really sharing the details. So what are some main pieces of a story, like a storyline, that people maybe can take away with them? Like, what are the main things? Like, you know, you hear, the beginning, middle, and the end, but like, are there some other things, like other like steps along the way that goes into like a really transformational, successful, like potent story?
So one of the pieces that I like to share when I'm teaching is a story arc. It's just a basic story arc, and it does not have to be the same for every person or for every book or chapter or whatever it is you're working on. But I always like to start people out with stuck.
So where was it that you were sitting there going, oh my goodness, I'm so stuck. I'm never getting unstuck. I'm in the mud. I'm in the weeds. I can't possibly change. That's where it's a good place to start people, because a lot of your readers are stuck. And that's why they're approaching your book. Talk a little bit about that. You don't want to stay there because you don't want the reader to stay stuck. You want to draw them through the rest of the process. Tell them about your aha moment next. Why did you know that you had to make that change? How did you know that, there was no turning back? When did you decide like it's time to fix this? Or I have no choice. I'm on this journey now. So that's your aha moment. And from there, you want to showcase the ups and downs, the transformation. Transformation is messy. It goes up and down. It's a wavy line, whatever it is you want to picture. A lot of people picture, like a butterfly in a cocoon and it's all gooey and you got half of a wing there. It's not fully formed. Nobody is in there looking, going, oh, what a beautiful butterfly. They're like, oh, it's a worm. It's messy. So if that's what helps you talk about that messy middle, use that. Talk about your transformation, how things changed. And you want to draw that part out a little bit, because that's where people are going to connect to. A lot of people will say, oh my goodness, I went and bought a pizza even though I was on a diet. I get that. I've been there. Or, I've had my business for 5 years and sure enough, I stopped posting on social media and nobody was booking. We've all been in those situations. So letting people know, hey, this was a mess. It lets people know that they're okay being a mess too. And then you want to get to,
I think it's so true, because there is, it's just so easy to get caught up in the perfection that you see, like a lot of people portray in their marketing. And like, even though they share the story, it's like we, as human beings, like, we're visual creatures, and like we see things and we project things and we internalize things and all of that. So sometimes, if you don't really take in the full story and really feel it and really connect to it, I think that's one of the things with social media. Although there's so much good about it, it's like one of the things, it's easy to just put people on pedestals and be like, yeah, everything seems so perfect, and maybe you're so successful because XYZ, and like you had this and I don't, and there's all these thoughts and things that we make up, and sometimes I think that is the power of books, because you have to also seek it out. You have to actually want to read the book and then really take it in and really absorb it and really be like, yeah, like that story will stay with me forever. And so when you're in those moments of like, I feel like giving up, or I don't know if this is the right path, or whatever it is, you can always reference back to that book. I think there's something really empowering about books. Interestingly, you said like you grew up reading books. Actually, mine's like the complete opposite. I was not a reader. Like I was not at all. I actually was more like into arts and dance. I thought I'd end up being like an actress or something. I used to go to like acting school, and I did some plays and things like that. And I was always like dancing around, with my cousins and friends and stuff. So I always, I never really gravitated to books, even though I was like an average student. Like I wasn't the top of the class or anything, but I was like, if I actually applied myself, I, probably could have got way better grades, but I just didn't. I wasn't super interested in like the things that were being taught at school, although I love learning. And I never really read books until I had my spiritual awakening when I was 25. It was like, I can't remember what is the first book I ever read. One of them was Return to Love by Marianne Williamson.
Okay.
Yeah, and the other one was, these probably, I don't know if it was my first book, but those two, and Conversations with God by Neil Donald Walsh, those were probably like my two first like books that I just could not put down, where I finished them to the end and I was like, whoa, like my whole world changed, literally, like my whole overnight, like my whole perspective on how I'd lived my life, like my perspective, everything. Because I considered myself like I had a lot of trauma, from my from my childhood and stuff. And so I was living this life where it was like I was like walking toxic positivity, you could probably say. Like I was really positive and optimistic and all of that, but there was a lot of denial, probably. Yeah, a lot of denial, and probably still a lot of fear. And so that kind of woke me up to the fact of like, Tahnya, you're not even scratching the surface of what's possible for your life. Like, so those books really were the biggest game changers for me. And then ever since then, I've been obsessed. Like I have Audible and I just listen to books all day long. I just love it. So, and I've read, I would say maybe 100 more books by now. Yeah. So yeah, it's amazing. Okay, so the story arc. So it was, what was the first one again?
I'll start with Stuck.
Stuck, yes, Stuck,
Yes.
and then the aha moment, and then all the
Yes.
messy middle.
Yes. Yeah, and then you want to end with the hope, because you always want to make sure that people understand that, there are better times ahead. They can get through it, because they've connected with you on all the other pieces. So they know, okay, if you did it, I can do it too.
Yes. Have you ever, what do you think of the hero's journey? Because I have read in a lot of marketing books, they share the hero's journey thing, like process. And I think that's wonderful too, because you really feel like sometimes, I feel sometimes like the hero of my own journey. Sometimes I'm like, yeah, like I got through some pretty crazy stuff and I'm really proud of that. But then in business, it's really about making your customer the hero and not you. So what would you say is the difference between sharing your story and like making you the hero versus making them the hero? And yes, like giving them hope, but getting rid of some of those beliefs that they have, which is like, yeah, you might be able to do that, but I can't because of XYZ.
Mm-hmm. So I think that the structure that you follow needs to work for your business. So if it's like the hero's journey, if it's more like the story arc I was talking about, or if it's something completely different, it should always work for your business. Some people will want to follow just a chronological story arc. But I would say that as far as your audience versus you, your book is always actually about your audience. So it's what they need, what they want. I've worked with people who were like, I really want to tell this story. And I'm like, it doesn't even fit in here. Like there's no way of squeezing this story in here. Make it a Facebook post. It doesn't work with what you want to accomplish with your book. And I think that that's a tough thing for a lot of people, because, you're already being vulnerable. You've already opened everything up and you're, showing them your heart. And now I'm saying, not this piece right here. Or this, not this.
What about the J.K. Rowlings of the world?
The people with
say, what if because like, I don't know, I mean, with J.K. Rowling's, like she just believed in her book so much, but would you say it was just pure creativity and magic and it just came out, or do you think she knew that there was a gap and that she wanted to fill it?
I don't know. It could have been that she was just like, this is what I want to do, and I am going to make it work no matter what it's going to take. It's definitely a magical series, definitely a lot of creativity. And I think it was the right time for it to come out. It just happened to be the right time.
And so many other stories like that, like the Lord of the Rings and like other things, which I'm not actually a huge fan of. I'm not a super fictional person. I know a lot of people love it though, but yeah, I guess it's just like there are anomalies out there, but what you're saying is like to kind of have more chance at like success and like predictability and sustainability. It's like there are processes and there are certain things that we can follow to get the success that we without making it like totally just random.
Yeah, definitely. I would say and as far as like what the different ways to publish,
There's, traditional publishing. What we do is called hybrid publishing. That's where the author pays to have the book produced and, put out to the world. There's self-publishing, and, it really depends on what you want out of the book. If your thing is, I have a huge platform, I know I can sell a ton of copies, and I really want to go with a traditional house, go with a traditional house. If you really want more control over your book and you want to get it done now and not have to wait for somebody to say, yep, we'll take that one, go with hybrid. Or, if you want to do something that it really depends on what you want. But I would say do what makes you happy and is going to work for your business.
Yeah. I love that. Okay. What has been some of your favorite books that you've worked on so far, or do you just love all of them?
I just love all of them.
Yeah.
I've worked on so many books at this point. I really don't think I could pick a favorite. Just a lot of different topics. I feel like I grow every time that I get to work with another client, because there are just so many wonderful things to write about. We did a book about kindness last year that was totally not what I was expecting. It's called Living Kindly. And when she first approached me about it, I was kind of like, okay, a book about kindness. We're going to talk about nice things. This is a good thing to put out. And then it's a compilation of a bunch of different stories from different writers. And it is just beautiful. Like, every writer had a different perspective on kindness in their lives. So I think that, something like that, you're able to grow in so many different ways and get these different perspectives. That was the first book that we published, Borealis.
Wow.
And we've done so many since then, and each one, it's like I get to dive into the writer's head and figure out who they are and what has turned them into the person they are today, and then they're impacting me and I'm helping them impact so many people. That it's just a wonderful journey.
That's amazing. I love that. Yeah, there's so many different perspectives on things that we might just think we have our own version of, but it's like everybody has a different version. I think it's so important to take in those different perspectives and let it shape us and let it, shape us in a way. So what is your message to the world?
Oh, my message, embrace your journey and take notes along the way.
Yes, document it. I love that.
Yeah, because I don't think that any of our journeys are meant for just us. It's meant for us to share and to help others grow.
Oh my God, that is so true. That is so true. And, something that if you are somebody who, there is this, it comes back to Harry's book, like this media uproar about how dare he, share his story and all of these things. And it's so disruptive and it's so this and that, there's a lot of negativity. Well, I've seen, maybe that's because it's just the mainstream media. I don't know. But I truly, truly believe that our stories aren't just meant for us. And when there's a lot of people invested in the secrecy of the things, maybe that's something just to look at.
Yeah, definitely something to think about.
Yeah, I love that. So there are some closing questions that I ask every guest. So the first one is what is one of the, what is one piece of business advice that you found out the hard way?
Know what my message is before I, get out there and start talking. I think, and I'm not saying that imperfect action is a bad idea, but I think that mixed messages really don't help. So knowing what you want to say, who you want to work with, at least having a vague idea before you just start getting on social media, especially before you pay for advertising or something like that. You want to make sure that what you're saying is resonating and that it's okay with you in here too. Because if you're out there just saying okay, this is my message because this guy over here is saying that this is my message, but it's not really feeling good in here, you're not going to get anywhere. So definitely figure out what your message is, make sure it's all aligned and go with it.
100%. It's so funny. That's like the embodiment piece, I feel. Like people think, yeah, message, but I'm like, yes, but it's also the embodiment piece, because when I first started my journey, my message was freedom. It was really all around freedom. But I was so not embodied in that message. I had just, kind of invested in some mentorship around just online business, and like my background's in marketing, like corporate marketing. And yeah, like when I started my entrepreneurial journey, I just wanted more freedom. I was like, okay, time freedom, location freedom, financial freedom, like all of these things that I'd never really considered before, because I was just on this traditional path of like, this is the only path for me. But then my mind opened up. And freedom is still a huge part of my message. But it's different. It's not about those things. It's about the inner freedom. And so, yeah, and that it took like a long journey, or like the transformation journey of like really finding that and really understanding, like once you really find that self-expression and that inner freedom and that creativity, all of those things, those are the things that lead you to the ultimate freedom of whatever it is that you're seeking out there.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So yeah, the message, it is really important to define. And I think especially as coaches, healers, any entrepreneurs, creatives like watching this, it's like, if you can spend most of your time like figuring out your message before, you start doing all the things, like wasting heaps of time on content creation and advertising, like make sure you really are bought into your own message. You're like, do I believe this? Like 1000%. And like, would I shout it from the rooftops, like even if someone was trying to pull me down? Yeah. Okay. And what's one piece of life advice that you would leave behind?
Oh, that's a tough question. How about always advocate for your heart? So what you believe in, always be ready to speak up and step up for it. And, really, again, the embodiment piece, if it's something that's a very deep truth for you, be ready to stand up and say, this is a deep truth and it's important to me.
Yes. Yes. I love that. And the last one is, if you fill in the blank, you're closer than you think.
Believe in yourself.
Yes. Which is so, it seems like it's not something that most people focus on, but I really, at the end of the day, when I look at the people who have really come out the other end of some really transformational journeys and some of the most successful people, it's like the foundation is they just believe in themselves, no matter how many failures they've had. Like, yeah, it's so true.
And it could be tough.
Yeah, like especially on the entrepreneurial journey, like it has to be a base on which you build on. And it's like, even for me, I will say, like when I first started, I wouldn't say I believed in myself, because I really had no idea what I was doing. But it's like, it was listening to that deep inner knowing of like, I don't feel that confident yet. Maybe there's some doubt of like, am I even on the right path? There's a lot of uncertainty. There's all of this stuff, but it's like deep down, there's just this inner knowing that it's like, this might not be the thing, but I know it's going to lead me to the thing. So that like, yeah. And so that I guess in a way, that self-trust is the belief, but then as you go along, your belief then in yourself starts to strengthen. That's been my journey anyway.
Yeah.
So I found like,
just being able to start out with a belief in yourself, it lets you trust yourself. And even if you say, I have no idea what I'm doing, but I trust myself and I trust that I am on the right path, you'll get there, because the journey is important.
Yes, it's so important. Thank you so much. It's been amazing. Thank you. Thanks for coming on. And I hope I can have you back one day. It's been amazing. Thank you.
I would love to be back.